Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be providing an update to the bull market support band. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, of course, we use these weekly videos, essentially, where we talk about this to also speculate amongst other things beyond just the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA, but they have proven themselves to be quite useful through the cycles, and so why not continue to provide updates on them? Okay. Now, to recap, Bitcoin over the last year or so was rejected by the bear market resistance band on a number of occasions. And even over here back in November, upon this rejection, right, we even speculated going into it that it was likely just going to repeat what happened in 2018, right, where everyone thinks June's the bottom and it's not the bottom. Now, here's the thing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there could have existed a set of circumstances where we did not break to the downside had what happened with FTX not have occurred, right? There's always a chance that that didn't happen and you didn't get that breakdown. But regardless, that is how it ultimately played out. Not that dissimilar from what we saw just another cycle before, right? A breakdown. Now, this breakdown over here was much more than this one over here. And we will talk about that here in just a little bit and the implications of it, okay? So one thing to consider is, actually, let's check in on where they are right now. So the 20-week SMA is at 18,959. The 21-week EMA is at 2416. So basically, you're looking at the bull market support band from 19K to 20.4K. Now, I know these seem like FUD prices and like there's no way they could ever happen, but it is, it's interesting how quickly mentalities can change, right? You go from 1 minute, you look at these prices like, oh, how can we ever break through them? And then once you break through them, a lot of times people, the instinct is to think, oh, well, we're never going to go back down there. But one thing to consider is that they are starting to go back up. So they will start to move higher every single week. So next week, the 20-week SMA could very well be higher than where it is this week. So they are moving target. And the reason why it's useful, and get comfortable with this discussion because it's likely going to be a discussion we have for the next 12 to 18 months, right? The reason why this is a something we need to follow is when you look at the context of history, okay? If you hold it, you tend to go up for a lot longer. So when you hold it as support, right? We held it as support in September of 2020, went to new all-time highs, right? We held it as support in September of 2021. We went to a new high. Now, it wasn't nearly as impressive, but technically speaking, we did go to a new high. Of course, being technically correct is the best way to be correct. Now, my favorite, arguably, bull market was this one, was because we just basically held on the 20-week SMA over and over and over again, right? We never really got that far ahead of ourselves. We went up, we came down. We went up, we came down, and we kept testing it. And then once we got too far gone, right, we just blasted off into outer space here at the end, we were too far gone to hold it as support anymore. So the point is if you go up a little bit and then come back down to test it as support, you have a much higher likelihood of actually holding it as support. If you go up a massive amount from this area here in September 2017 to this one, this was a 540% move before we went back to retest it. When that happens, we usually don't hold it as support. So the magnitude of the move can often help dictate whether we're going to hold it as support or not. In 2019, the magnitude of the move was several 100% as well, 250%. We did not hold it as support, right? It's a much harder as measured from the 20-week, not as measured from the bottom, right? Just as measured from the 20-week. When we broke through the 20-week here, it was only a 56% move above it. And what happened, right? We held it as support. Now, that's not to say that every time you have a smaller move to the upside, you're going to hold it as support. Here's an example where we only went up 30% and then fell and broke back down. But again, it's one of those things that the further you go up, it likely just means you're going to be in for some pain a few months down the road. But if you come back down and test it and build out a base, it's much more likely to see a longer and sustained move and not something that just lasts 2 or 3 months, right? So that's the clear distinction between it. And if you look at history, right, when you get above it, if you don't hold it as support, like 2019, we never held it as support. No, we didn't get a new all-time high, right? And we had to kick the can down the road and try again later. When we tried again over here, we came back down. These 6 weeks were very difficult for a lot of people. If you go back on my channel and watch those videos, like every other video was just called like hold the line or some derivative of that, because we were hoping that we would actually hold support here so that we could provide confidence to actually go on a bull market, a bull run, to actually go to new highs. Now, arguably the bull run started well before that, but you need that confirmation of, okay, let's back test it as support, and off we go. There still were a lot of people back over here calling for the gap to fill in the daily CME time frame at 9,600. It never got filled, and then they basically just completely missed this because instead of buying it at $9,800, they wanted to buy it at $9,600. But it all seems silly when you think about it years later, right? And again, holding it as support here, we ended up going to a new high. So again, right now, Bitcoin is sitting at 23.6K. Now, it would be a mistake to assume that it has to go back down and retest it, because it doesn't have to anytime soon. I mean, a lot of this could depend on what the Federal Reserve does this week. Likely it's going to be 25 basis points. But, and I've said this before, right? You have inflation coming down, which is a good thing for risk assets to see that coming down, but you still don't really have the deterioration of the US economy. Now, either it's going to be a lagged effect or the Fed achieves a soft landing, right? Place your bets. That's what people are placing their bets on right now. If you think it's going to be just a lagged effect and the unemployment rate is going to go up, then that would, of course, lead us into worse times. If you think the Fed achieves a soft landing, that's a different matter. But right now, Bitcoin is, from this move here, from the 20-week, remember, not from the bottom, from the 20-week, Bitcoin is up about 27% or so. So not really that big of a move in the grand scheme of things, right? Now, the thing to watch for is if Bitcoin continues to move higher on like a vertical line, basically, which is what it's been doing, then, I mean, that could last for a little while, right? I mean, it lasted for a while in 2019, but the problem is if we get too far gone from the bull market support band, then by the time we try to test it as support, we often don't hold it. So just something to keep in mind. So if it does pull back, if Bitcoin comes back in here and comes back down to this range, this like 18K to 19K range, that'll be the area that you'll want to see hold as support. If it continues higher first, then of course the 20-week estimate will lag behind it. But the further it goes, the longer it takes to actually back test it. History shows us that it's less likely to hold as support. I mean, if Bitcoin were to go to 30K and then test it, it's likely not going to be as successful, or the likelihood is not as high. It doesn't mean it can't. I mean, there's still plenty of rallies over here where it rallied up, 60, 70%, and it did hold as support. But the point is the further it rallies up, the less likely it will be to hold as support eventually. Now, a lot of people might not care about that, right? I mean, if Bitcoin were to rally up like this, right, they and if they're like short-term traders, swing traders, whatever, like maybe they just take profits on it and they don't care if it holds as support or not, right? If it comes back down, and then they may come in at a later time. But the problem, again, is that it takes a long time for this sort of base to build out. If you look at the context of history, look at 2015, right? First was rejection, then we got above it, and then we failed to hold it, and then we got above it and held it, right? That was 2015. Look at 2019, and by the way, in this cycle, we put in a new low on some exchanges, right? I mean, a lot of people don't want to talk about that. I mean, we put in a low in January at 166.45, and then over here we went down to 162 on some exchanges, right? Technically it was a new low, and it came in Q3 of 2015 on some exchanges. Not all, but on some exchanges it did. And it was a brutal drawdown, right? And at the time, I mean, like, I didn't know this was about to occur, right? I thought it was thought it was lights out for a while. I mean, we didn't have the same chart back then, that we have today, right? I mean, it was just basically this little thing over here. I mean, I didn't know that it was going to go into something like this, but one of the things here that I go back to is the time that it normally takes. This here, I mean, it took quite a bit of time. I mean, just sort of oscillate around it. In 2019, we had a massive move up, right? And I mean, to be completely honest, the early stages of it are not that dissimilar from what we're seeing today. Now, do I think Bitcoin is going to go 4x up from the November bottom? Not at this point. No, I mean, I don't. But I mean, that's what it would look like, right? I mean, something like that. I don't think this is the most likely scenario for this year. But I mean, if it were to play out, like, just to give you an idea, if you missed 2019, right? If you missed 2019, if you were not here for this and you want to know what it was like, that's what it was like, right? It was Bitcoin. It's sort of like, if you were to draw the comparison, it would have been like Bitcoin going all the way back up to $53,000 or something. That was what it was like back over here, but you went from 3K to 14K. It was over a 4x move. It was a crazy move. I mean, this move here would be quite impressive if Bitcoin could achieve that. One of the reasons why I think it's not as likely to occur in the like as a 4x move like it did back then are two reasons really. It doesn't mean it can't go up more than it is now, but the two main reasons would be the market cap is a lot higher, right? So the market cap today is a lot higher than it was back then. And we know it takes a lot more money to move the market that high. And then furthermore, the other reason is because this move here was also sort of spurred on by this massive capitulation to the downside, right? So you had in this instance over here, you had a 52% drop from that June, from this sort of area at 6K. If you take this region over here at like 19K, which is where 19K, which is where the base is being built out at, it was 18% down. If you want to take it from the top here, it was about 25% down. It was about half, right? About half the move. I mean, I said we were going to talk about this later in the video, so here we are, right? So this was about half the move down as this one was, right? So then this one rallied up, 346%. So I do think part of that was brought on by the magnitude of the drop. And of course, the market cap was a lot lower back then than it is today. I mean, the market cap at 3K was not nearly as high as at 24K, right? 24K, where you're looking at a much higher market cap. So far from the bottom, Bitcoin's already up about 53%, right? 100% move up from the bottom would put it at around 30 to 31K. So I'm just trying to provide the context of sort of the magnitude of some of these moves. Now, the other thing that I think we should look at beyond the bull market support band are some of the moving averages, okay? So there's the 50-week, which I think is probably going to be the most important right now. We're already above the 20-week, right? So we don't need to worry about getting above that right now. Let's look to the 50-week. Why do we look to the 50-week? Well, there's been a few times where it has made a difference, right? Look at what happened over here in 2012. We got slightly above it, but we ultimately got a rejection the following week or so. We came back down. We went sideways for months. I mean, like, you're talking about, going sideways from like February until June, and then we finally broke back out above it, okay? Then look what happened over here. What happened on the first real attempt to get back above it? Complete rejection. This was actually late in 2015. Okay. Now, if you want to compare this to the halvings, this is a important part to talk about. There's always this discussion about whether Bitcoin is more dependent on the halvings, or is it more dependent on, say, like liquidity, like excess liquidity. I think it's both. Okay, so I'm actually in the middle on this. I think it depends on both. I think the halving it pulls people back in. I love the narrative, and also, I mean, you are reducing the block rewards, but on the other hand, you also need the demand side of things, right? Supply, models that are only based on supply, they completely missed the demand side of the equation, which I think is an important aspect. So I do think, liquidity is an important component as well. But if you look over here at what happened in 2015, the first attempt to get back above the 50-week was rejected, right? So in both cases, the 50-week was more or less rejected. Over here, we did rally above it, but again, we never saw any follow through. You always want to see follow through to actually count it, right? So, I mean, this was still a nice move above it. I mean, we went quite a bit above it, but again, it still ended up pulling back from that level, 45% or so, 46%, before then stabilizing and continuing higher. You look at 2015, we got rejected and we came back down and, basically put in a double bottom. And then in 2019, we came up to it and we hesitated for a month before breaking through. So in all cases, the 50-week provided a significant level of resistance. In one case, we hovered at it for a month and then broke. In another case, we got rejected by it, double bottom, then came back up. And the other one, we rallied a little bit beyond it, but ultimately came back down. So what it shows, again, is that the 50-week does provide a sort of like a point for Bitcoin to sort of breathe and figure out what its next move wants to be. The thing that I also am taking a look at is the 200-week. Listen, the 200-week is not normally something we worry about at this point because normally it's well behind us, and we're simply talking about holding it as support sometime in the future, right? Like in 2019, the narrative was not, can we get above the 200-week? It was, when are we going to revisit it? Because normally we hit it a few times in, during an accumulation phase, right? Normally we hit that 200-week SMA a few times. So it was, when is it going to happen? That's not the question we're asking ourselves right now, right? The question we're asking ourselves right now is, can we break it? Can we get above it? Forget holding it as support right now. We're below it. You guys remember the date with Destiny? Well, this is another date, but this time it's not because we're falling down to it. It's because we're moving up to it. Just like over here in July, where we ultimately got rejected. We got above it a little bit, but again, still no follow through on the move, and we ultimately just came right back down. The thing that has really captured my attention recently is the confluence of a lot of these things, right? So you have the 200-week SMA at 24.8K, right? You have and it's going up. You have the 50-week at 25.3, and it's going down. And you have the price of Bitcoin at 23.6, and it's been trending higher. So you have sort of the convergence of three different things right here, right? You have the 50-week coming down, you have the 200-week going up, and then you have the price rallying on up to it. You also have the prior local top at 25.2K. And look at this local top right in between those two moving averages. Like, it's almost too perfect that they're all converging to the same level, right? All converging to the same level. So this is going to, I imagine this will be a battle. With that said, I didn't have a YouTube channel in early 2019. I created it in late 2019. And there were a lot of people over here that said 6K is going to take a long time to break, right? They said, it's going to take a long time to break, right? We're going to come back down and it's going to take forever to break it. And we just sliced through it like it wasn't even there, okay? So momentum is a powerful thing. And so, there's a lot of confluence around this 25K level, and especially coming off a rally of, that would be 60%, right? And we talked about this too, by the way, in some of the, worst possible case scenario outcomes. If you go back and watch that series, look to see what this 60% move does if we're able to achieve it. Does it stall out here, or does it break through like 2019? Okay. If it stalls out, we have some talking to do about a few things. If we break above it, then that changes the sort of changes the equation. But that's what I think we have to look for. 25K is going to be the level that I think a lot of people are looking towards for Bitcoin to see, can it break it? And if it can, how explosive is the move beyond it? And if it can't, does it just come right back down like 2015? Right? What happens? So I think that's the level to watch, that 25K level. Watch that going into the next couple of weeks. When are these going to cross? Okay, I've had a lot of, I put out some tweets about this, and I saw some people asking about it. And listen, guys, to be completely honest, like, I'm not a huge fan of the terminology golden crosses and death crosses. I'm really not, because oftentimes, at least in the short term, you'll see the move go in the opposite direction. So like a lot of times when you get a golden cross in the short term, the price will dump. And then a lot of times when you get a death cross in the short term, the price will pump. Okay, so one of the reasons I don't like it is because when you put out a video titled Golden Cross or Death Cross, if it reads Golden Cross, everyone assumes the price has to, just go up. If you put out it says Death Cross, everyone assumes the price has to go down. But that's just what they're called, right? That's what people call them. And so technically speaking, if and when these cross, it will be a weekly death cross, which Bitcoin has never had before, on the 50-week SMA and the 200-week SMA. Now, if you extrapolate these out, which, again, they're taking up long periods, it looks like they're going to cross, the week of the 6th of February or the 13th. It looks like that's when they're going to cross. So within the first half of February, you'll likely see these two things cross. Now, what has Bitcoin historically done when they cross? People keep asking me, look, it's never happened before. I don't know. It's never actually happened before. It came close to happening over here, right? But we avoided it. But by this point, the 50, we had been trending up for months, right? This was a slight trend higher since January of 2015 until October. This is not the case this time. We haven't been trending higher for 9 months, right? We've been trending lower. So this move to the upside only recently started. So these are very, very likely going to cross. I imagine it would take an irrational move higher to avoid it, just because it takes into account so much data, right? 200 weeks of data and 50 weeks of data. Any single week isn't going to contribute that much to the price, because it's only going to be 1/50th of the contribution. And despite this rally, the 50 weeks still going down. And of course, the 200 weeks still going to likely continue trending higher. So this is going to cross. What does it mean, right? This never happened for Bitcoin before, so I don't know. With the S&P, it usually didn't mean good things. It's never happened with Bitcoin. I don't know. If you look at the daily, just for the bulls, we have a golden cross coming, right? Now, does a golden cross mean that Bitcoin's about to go on a bull run? This is one of those things I say it's a necessary but not sufficient condition. So it's necessary to see it because it's confirmation of the trend going in the right direction, but you also need to see the 20-week SMA hold as support. You need to see us above it, and then you need to see it hold as support. So golden cross and all those things. We're above the 20-week. We don't yet have a golden cross. Haven't held the 20-week as support. So we're one of 3 right now. We're at least above the 20-week. That's something, right? We'll take it. Still don't have a golden cross. Still haven't held the 20-week as support. Historically, what has the golden cross meant? And, I'm going to ignore what it meant back over here. We care about what has it meant after a year-long bear market, right? What does it mean after a year-long bear market? Okay. Interestingly enough, I'll show you an interesting pattern here. And I thought, and we talked about this last cycle too, if you were following me back then. Not a lot of people followed me back then because I didn't really have a ton of, I was really new. But in the first cycle, Bitcoin had 1 golden cross before the bull market began. In the second cycle, it had 2. 1, 2 before the bull market began. In the third cycle, would you care to guess, right? How many did it have? Right? Yep, you guessed it. 3. 1, 2, and 3 before the actual bull market to new all-time highs began. Now, does that mean it's going to have 4 this time? Probably not, right? This is probably not necessary to say it has to have 4. But the point is like it might not be 1, okay? Because a lot of times you'll spend a while just sort of moving all over the place before mustering up the courage for Bitcoin to actually go to new all-time highs. So I would look to that as at least one indication of a positive development, and we'll continue to talk about that. Remember though, a lot of times when you get these like golden crosses on the daily, right? I mean, like look at this. This is a death cross. Price pumped into the death cross. Look at this golden cross. Price went down. Okay? Here's a golden cross. Price dropped from 10K down to like 8,500 or 8,600. So a lot of times with a golden cross, you'll get a short-term dump. With a death cross, you'll get a short-term pump. We've seen that play out many, many times. So something to watch for. And then the only other thing I want to talk about, and then we're going to wrap it up, because I know a lot of people are thinking, right? It's, how is this possible with the deterioration of the macroeconomic conditions, right? Well, remember, and we've talked about this before with regards to recession, there's not really an indication yet that we're in one. There's indications that one is likely coming at some point in the future, but until the unemployment rate goes up, right, it's not here yet. And as long as inflation keeps going back down, that remains, a positive thing for risk assets. Not to say that they're just going to go straight up until something else happens, but inflation coming back down is a positive thing for risk assets. And as long as you don't really see the unemployment rate going higher or things of that nature, then I imagine risk assets speculators are going to speculate on risk assets until you see something transpire in a material way with regards to the labor market, which the Federal Reserve isn't trying to get to loosen up a bit. This is going to be an important week because we have a lot of things going on this week. We have earnings for Meta. We have earnings for Google, Amazon, and Apple. So Meta's on Tuesday, I believe, and then I think Apple, Amazon, and Google are on Wednesday. We also have FOMC on Wednesday, and then on Friday, I think we have the jobs report, and we have non-farm payroll. So we got a lot of stuff going on this week, and my guess is if everything comes in, as people would hope that it does in terms of like not wanting to watch the economy fall apart, then risk assets could do well. If any of those things don't come in like that, then I imagine risk assets would take a hit. Like if Powell comes out more hawkish than ever, then that could do some damage. Or if the unemployment rate comes out and it spikes up a lot, that could do some damage. But if everything comes in normal, then of course you could still see risk assets continue to sort of move here. So I think that's what we're looking at right now. And whenever the time comes for Bitcoin to correct, it'll be to watch the 20-week. Does it actually hold as support or not? And also watch the dominance too. Does that go up? Because it should. I mean, it should. We've been waiting on it forever, and it's finally moving higher. So that's where we stand. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Remember to check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Subscribe to the channel if you're not, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.